Greetings. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar regarding the Early Childhood Program Self-Assessments. My name is Tamala Olsby, and I am an education specialist in the Early Childhood Education Division at TEA. Here is our agenda for this brief presentation. We will cover an overview of the documents. We will talk about using the self-assessment documents. We will talk about 3 models for completing the self-assessment, the staff that might be included, the timeline, and where to go if you still have some questions. And then we will close for the day. So let's begin by completing a high-level overview of the Early Childhood Program Self-Assessment. Let's first go over the why behind a self-assessment. Why would an LEA want to complete such a document? Well, the first reason is for continuous improvement. The education field is always in a state of evaluating what is being done and then improving that. The goal always being positive child outcomes. The second reason behind the self-assessment is that for pre-K, it meets a statutory requirement. LEAs are required to select and implement appropriate pre-kindergarten, appropriate methods for evaluating their pre-kindergarten program by measuring student progress and meeting the results of the program evaluation available to parents. And you'll see that I've listed 2 references, one to statute and one to Commissioner's Rule regarding this statutory requirement. This program self-assessment meets that statutory requirement. Here are the current 4 versions of the Early Childhood Program Self-Assessment. There's one for pre-K, there's one for K, and both of those are posted on the TEA website. There is also one for 1st and 2nd grade that will be posted very soon. There is also a guide, which we will discuss in further detail later in this presentation. And then finally on this slide, we have a link to all these important documents. Information in this presentation covers all of the documents that you see here on this slide. Within the program self-assessment, there are components. And these components include access and enrollment, administrative and teaching staff, curriculum, instruction, assessment, learning environments, family engagement, and transitions. As you can see, these documents, these self-assessment documents, cover many important aspects of a quality educational experience. So let's go on now to talk a little bit about the self-assessment process. And it includes the following. The first is to collect data. And that data is collected and is used to complete the program self-assessment document. After the data is collected, you analyze the data. And the data can be used to identify strengths and opportunities for growth. And then finally, changes are implemented based on the analysis of the data. So let's delve a little deeper on exactly how the self-assessment documents are used. This slide illustrates the various parts of the self-assessment rubric, and I'm going to go over those now. At the top is the component, and you saw earlier that access and enrollment is a component of the self-assessment. So at the very top of the page would be the component. And then on the side, left-hand side, you would see the strategies that go along with whatever the component is. In this case, there are 5 strategies mentioned under access and enrollment. There is also a rating level, and this quality rating level goes from developing to proficient to exemplary. Most LEAs hopefully will be graded as proficient when they are analyzing their data. Some LEAs may find themselves in certain strategies or in certain components that they are doing actually exemplary work. And then there will be areas in an LEA that they may find a strategy or a component in the developing quality level. In each quality level, for each strategy, there are indicators. And those are descriptive, very precise, and measurable descriptions of each of the strategies for each of the components. So when an LEA is using the rubric, they would read across the line, the developing, the proficient, the exemplary, and decide where does their data show them that they are. And then that is the level of quality for that particular strategy. The guide gives participants very important information regarding the self-assessment document. As you can see on the page shown on this slide, the guide might give you definitions. It also answers some frequently asked questions, and these are developed for items that we have heard from the public on. And so we've tried to make this very user-friendly. This guide should actually be the very first source of information that LEAs use when they have a question. Once every strategy in every component has been evaluated, the results can be compiled on this compilation sheet, much like the one that you see on this slide. This compilation sheet is within the self-assessment document, so you don't have to create it. In this way, once all of the data is put on this sheet of paper, it is very easy to see overall results, things that an LEA might excel in and things that an LEA can use for their continuous improvement plans. The next step in the self-assessment process is to identify strengths, to identify opportunities to grow, and then write out the next steps. This page, once it is completed, can be used to communicate the results of the Early Childhood Program self-assessment to stakeholders, such as to parents, to staff members, and even to the board. Let's talk briefly now about the 3 models for completing the Early Childhood Program self-assessment. As stated, there are 3 models: individual, committee, and then committee with subcommittee. We're going to go over each of those in more detail. The individual model is for small LEAs, those that serve a smaller number of students. The self-assessment committee would probably consist of just 1, maybe 2 persons who have access to all of the sources of evidence. This model is the most labor and time intensive. The next model, the committee model, can be used by small to medium LEAs. In this model, the work of the self-assessment is broken down into parts and spread out to various committees. This model may require multiple meetings leading up to an extended meeting to pull the whole document together. Finally, the subcommittee model can be used by medium to large LEAs. The self-assessment work, again, can be broken down into parts and then compiled together. This model is less labor and time intensive due to the larger number of personnel that are participating, but it often requires more coordination to pull the document together. You may be wondering which staff should be involved in the self-assessment process. This slide describes the staff members who are best suited to working on the self-assessment. Of course, depending on your district or your campus staff, the staff members you choose to include in your self-assessment process might differ slightly from those listed on this slide. You might also be wondering about when to start the self-assessment process. Let's look at a recommended self-assessment timeline. You will notice it goes from February to late May. So in February, you might identify your self-assessment committee members and conduct an orientation with them so that they know the self-assessment document well and what forms of evidence that they might collect. Then you would choose a format in early March. And by that, I mean you would decide, are you doing it by committees or by persons? Are you having several meetings and then a compilation meeting? All of those kinds of decisions you want to make early in this timeline. Mid-March through April, you would be collecting the evidence and then completing the tool using that evidence as early May. Then in mid-May, you could review the results and decide on your next steps. And then by late May, you could compile the report, finalize it, and share it with stakeholders. Remember, this is just a recommended timeline. You may want to make the progress longer, or you could make it shorter, depending on your needs. Hopefully, this short webinar has answered most of your questions regarding the Early Childhood Program self-assessment documents. But if you have questions, I want to remind you to please refer to the guide. It has been carefully compiled to give LEAs the information that they might need to complete the documents. You may also call someone in the Early Childhood Division at TEA with specific questions. If you have questions on pre-K or K tool, we would suggest you contact myself, Tamala Olsby. If you have questions on the first and second grade documents, you can call Jenna Reynolds. We are both very eager to assist you. We are reaching the end of our presentation, and I wanted us just to be reminded of the real reason that we do what we do every day. Our youngest students in Texas deserve the highest quality educational program that we could offer them. And our hope is that the Early Childhood Program self-assessment documents will assist you in your continuous improvement efforts. Thank you for joining us today.